Hello, Terry here with another episode of the Animation Industry Podcast. Today I'm chatting with a Toronto-based video game art director, but first I have a sponsored message for you. This episode is sponsored by my friends over at Rocket Sky 3D Animation School, who've created an amazing online program to train you to become a professional 3D character animator in a little over a year, even if you have absolutely zero experience at all. You'll learn everything from the ground up, from basic drawing for animation to producing your own short film. They help you master everything a studio wants to see in a portfolio to get you into the industry as quickly as possible. They also offer low tuition rates and installment plans, so if you're interested in a career in the amazing animation industry, which you know I am pursuing myself, or you want to level up your skills quickly, all you have to do is go and sign up at www.rocketsky.ca, and they'll send you more info about the program and free ebooks with top tips and tricks from the pros. And I'll include a link to all that in the description of this podcast, so please check them out. Now, back to this episode. Today I'm chatting with John Little, who is a Toronto-based multidisciplinary artist who works in video games, animation, illustration, and television. His first graphic novel, The Salesman, was published in 2015, and his latest creative effort was a collaborative one. John and his wife are eagerly awaiting the arrival of I didn't even read this beforehand, a baby girl in early November. Congrats, that's so great. Oh my gosh, 2 months.
Yeah,
wow.
Awesome.
Are you gonna name it Terry after me? Because I'm famous now?
We'll discuss it. We'll see. We'll bat that one about, but I don't think it's gonna land.
Okay, maybe I'll just keep this as the intro and just whatever. Anyways, hi John, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
So you have a hit Reddit post.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out a segue to lead into that.
I want to get that. That's why. That's why we're wearing sunglasses right now, right?
That is why we're wearing sunglasses right now. If you're just listening to this podcast, you won't see our amazing sunglasses. They're so reflective that I can actually see myself in my own computer screen, in your computer screen, in your sunglasses.
That is wild.
Yeah, I posted one of my animations that I was working on all summer to YouTube and then linked it up on Reddit, and it ended up getting the top spot on our videos and then reaching the front page in like overnight, which was insane. So I woke up to like 1,000 comments, like 170,000 views. It's been really overwhelming, but it's been really nice. I've been very emotional about it, reading all the comments. There hasn't been a single bad one yet, which is really surprising on Reddit. So yeah. Everybody's just so kind and nice. So I'm really happy about it.
That's amazing. I'm really happy for you too.
Well, thank you. And thanks for bringing that up. We aren't here to talk about that. We're here to talk about you and the things that you're doing right now that are really great. Yeah, it's
my star.
Yeah, so one thing I want to chat about with you is kind of the business side of things that we chatted a little bit about in our pre-chat, or kind of like how to look out for yourself as an artist once you're in the industry. Things like how to know if you're getting paid right, how to not be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
So, but first, let's talk about what you're doing right now, which is you're full-time at a video game startup in Toronto. So what does that even mean? Can you just kind of go through what you're doing, how that came about, etc.?
Sure. Yes. So I started there a little while ago, a couple weeks ago, actually. And what we're putting together right now is sort of a kids game. We're thinking something about like kind of programming in a space and making it creative and being able to build your own things and create something kind of awesome. So we're not really actually sure totally what we're building yet. We're still trying to figure it out. We're playing around and making things and having a good time, just testing it out on people and seeing what's sticking and what's not sticking. So that's kind of what we're up to. I'm doing all of the artwork essentially. So I'm in charge of creating the designs for that, creating the feel, I'm doing a lot of listening to what they're talking about, all the programmers, and figuring out what's happening there. So
this is something really new for you. How does it feel to be working for a couple of weeks on a video game startup doing all the art?
It's cool. I mean, it's great. It's really fun. There's a lot of work to do, obviously, but for the most part, it's amazing. There's nothing bad to say about it at all. Everything about it is great. Yeah. So, is there any specific thing you want to know about how this comes together?
Yeah, well, some things that you mentioned just while you were talking about it, like you're throwing stuff against the wall, seeing what sticks. Did you start off, and it's a kids game, did you start off with a specific niche or market in mind when you were like, okay, like say for example, like I don't know, kids 8 to 10 educational gap, like we want to create something that is a learning experience that teaches them grammar or something like that could be one thing. Like
Yeah.
what is the thing that drove your team to create a kids game?
Well, I think initially came from Onome, who's the guy who kind of like brought us all together, and he's been really interested in kids learning technology for a long time. And the last thing he did was an application that tried to teach kids how to program as well on these little machines that like little robotics. He's a robotics engineer, and that's sort of where we came together. So he had, are you familiar with the term of STEM, sorry, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So that's just sort of this part of learning that people are talking about right now, try to push on the kids because computers and whatnot are such a large part of everybody's life now. So that's initially what we came together to do, but we're not really trying to make a learning-based game necessarily. We want fun to be the very core feeling of it. It's not really about being educational as much as we want people to really enjoy ourselves with that kind of play style.
Gotcha. Is this a mobile game, I guess?
Currently, right now, we're thinking mobile. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess how did the conversation start that he came to you and was like, "Hey, John, like I'm working on this thing. Do you want to kind of quit everything you're doing and jump on ship?" Like how explain that to me? And also the emotional experience of I guess mentally putting all of your eggs into this basket too.
Sure. So initially, what happened was all the same guys and some more of us went out for drinks one day, and we were just talking about stuff. And I was doing freelance work at the time and was always looking to do more. And initially, Onome had asked me if I wanted to do some freelance work for them. So of course, I said yes. And then we had a meeting a couple weeks later, and we got together, and he, instead of asking to do freelance, he actually asked me to come on board, which kind of took me a bit aback because I was expecting it just to be a standard, let's discuss what you want and I'll fulfill that for you. And instead, it was something much better in a lot of ways, but really surprised me because I was kind of thinking about a certain trajectory for a while, and it was quite surprising. Yeah, I was really kind of investigating whether or not I wanted to stick doing freelance for a while because it was always a bit of a dream, it's always something that a lot of artists, at least I have always thought about. Can I survive as a freelance person? Am I able to make a living doing it? Because can be very hairy when it comes to actually having a sustainable income. And seem to be having a good go of it. So I was enjoying it, although the hours can be quite hectic. I when we all got together, like the initial team over at Creatables, which is where we're working now, when we all got together to discuss kind of what his vision was, and just being with the guys again in that group was just too magnetic, and I didn't want to let it go.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
So how long were you doing the freelance thing before this?
Not very long, like a couple of months, frankly.
Oh,
And yeah, because what happened was I was working for another company and they had closed down. They shuttered, to use like a publishing term. And they were another startup and they had run out of, the CEO couldn't find seed money to continue on. And they closed down the whole company. We're all laid off, and I needed to find cash, so I just jumped headfirst into freelance, and it really made a big difference. It allowed me to, bring money in, and because I've got a kid coming, which is
yeah.
crazy, and so yeah, it was pretty scary for a little bit, but then it became fun. It became really enjoyable and exciting.
Yeah, this is something I often think about because, like, from my experience, I had a very stable career. You know, I had the salary, the benefits, like same job for years. Going freelance is something that is very scary to me. So, how did you go from getting laid off to finding work right away? Did you start posting online that you're looking? Did you like go to like job board sites like Upwork or whatever? I don't know where to even like Fiverr. I don't know. How did you
Right.
get these gigs?
Well, like stuff like Fiverr, I've thought about as well, right? Like there's lots of places. I mean, I've worked as an art director for a long time now,
Yeah.
so there was a lot of I've used a lot of these different places. Like Creative Circle is one that I used in this particular instance. Since I worked with them before and hired other people through them, I just called them and asked them if they had any positions open to do anything, and they did. And I had work that 2 days later, which was good work. And it was also in the work I always wanted to do, which was concept art, which I'd always done with my job. Um, working in gaming, but it was always like a part of it, not the part of it, not the only thing I was doing. So this was a chance for me to just focus on concept art, and it was awesome. It was absolutely fantastic. It's a bit of I got a chance. It took me 10 years to convince someone to hire me to just do concept art, and I did it, and it's great, and I can move on now.
Nice. So what are some of the, just thinking about like the freelance thing that you did for a short while, what are some of the fears that kind of went away for you when you started freelance? I'm just think like like in my mind it's still kind of scary, but I know that a lot of people make a full career out of freelance. So switching from that stability to the freelance, what did you learn?
I learned that freelance, though it can be really appealing, and you have a lot of freedom to kind of do what you want and come and go as you please. I mean, obviously, I think it's kind of obvious almost that there isn't a lot of stability. You don't have vacations, you don't have uh, benefits. All of that stuff basically doesn't exist. So you have to take care of yourself. But that is also kind of what's joyous about it, is that you have a chance to, fail on your own, and that's kind of nice. So you get to go out there and search for work, look for work, and it's cool. And then some days you also get those moments where you don't have anything to do and you just go swimming. It's nice.
Yeah, nice. That does sound nice.
It,
Okay, so you also mentioned it took 10 years for you to convince somebody to do concept art. Let's backtrack a little bit and talk about your career because like you didn't just wake up and suddenly you're working at a video game startup. Like, where did it all begin for you? What was the dream that propelled you to pursue video game concept art?
well, I mean, concept art was something that I always wanted to do, but yeah, so because it really dovetailed well with what I was doing before, which was painting. And
So let's start there. What propelled you into painting?
right, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I painted a lot when I was a kid because, let me think. So initially I learned that I could draw when I was a little kid, and it differentiated me from everyone else, and I got noticed by girls and all sorts of things like that, and I thought it was fantastic, and I really focused on it a lot. And then in high school, um, I just decided I wanted to start painting. I guess because I thought had something special to say about the world, and I really wanted to express it, and I wanted to do something different. So I did a lot of that, and I had a lot of inner turmoil, and I always wanted to show it in some sort of way, and I also thought girls liked it. It was a lot of these different things, and I hammered it really hard, trying to get really good at painting, and that was the core of that. And I was obsessed with Picasso and Rembrandt and other people like that. And then later on, and then comic book artists have always been a big part of my life too, like Neil Adams and Mobius and a lot of other people like that. Yeah, so that's how I ended up doing that.
Okay, so how did you go from painting to video games then?
While I was an out of work painter,
Well, you went to OCAD, right? Is that
Yeah,
right?
I went to OCAD and I had a great time. It was very fun. I kind of taught myself how to paint from a Boris Vallejo book, which was Boris Vallejo on painting. And you might know him. He's the big muscle man painter. He draws a lot of incredibly buff and swole muscle people in fantasy backgrounds. And anyways, he had the clearest book on painting I'd ever read. And it was very straightforward. It had a very delineated process. So I use that because art schools, at least OCAD, isn't particularly straightforward. They don't really believe in the idea, at least at that time, that painting had a technical purpose. They thought, you just experiment, you just throw anything at the wall and see if it's going to work or not. Traditionally, that's called kind of process-based painting, but I was interested in traditional process-based painting. So I taught myself how to do that, and then I started to see successes consistently. And okay, it was great. I met a lot of amazing people through there. Great artists, great painters, a lot of not so bastards. It was great.
Yeah, and then how did you dive from, doing these amazing paintings, which I can see in the background of where you're sitting,
Yeah,
to video games?
oh, right.
Sorry, what were you saying?
That's the question. The question. Yeah. So I guess yeah. So I was sort of out of work. Paintings. I couldn't sell them that often. And I'd have good periods and bad periods. So eventually, I decided I needed to go and re-educate myself in some sort of way. I needed to find a business that I could work in. And I thought about being a teacher for a while, and I was seriously considering that and going back to get my master's degree to teach or something. And then it just sort of occurred to me that I remembered Sheridan College, and that was something that I really wanted to do. And I'd actually also applied for a long time ago when I first went into school. And I was like, I either go to Sheridan or I'm going to go. I really didn't know. It was just an ignorant choice. It was like I was going to go to Sheridan or OCAD. And I got into Sheridan, but I didn't get into the animation program, which obviously I wouldn't have gotten into knowing what I know now. They just always put you into art fundamentals unless you're quite good, I suppose. Because I was just right out of high school, and I guess I went to OCAD instead. I was like, all right, I'll do painting instead. But eventually, I went back and went into computer animation, and that was probably the most life-changing moment of my life, was when that happened. Everything began to shift, and all of a sudden, all the things that all the ineptitudes that I had in the art world turned into aptitudes, and everything began to sort of change. Yeah.
So how did it feel very natural to pick up the skills you needed to get where you are now, I guess, when you're at Sheridan?
Yeah, I wasn't sure because I was a Luddite, right? Like I didn't know much about computer animation. I didn't know much about computers. I didn't know much, like I hadn't really used, I had a stylus because I had colored a comic that I had made previous to that. But that's pretty much all I really knew how to do. And I barely knew how to use it. I knew how to Photoshop a little bit, but not much. And then at Sheridan, I learned an awful lot, and it was kind of a struggle, but I figured it out. And then I got my first job after the industry day. One of the companies called Big Blue Bubble was by, and they're a really great little company, very creative stuff. And they were doing a game called Icarly. I joined the Click, which was, they were doing that for Activision, and it's really, I think, a bad game. It's really not great, but it's not really for me. Maybe I'm not the right person to talk about it. But there was also a viral thing on Reddit about that, actually. There was a picture of a giant container full of used iCarly to I Joined the Click games that it was going around Reddit once. And I helped make that game. That was the first game I ever made, was that game. And I came on there as a junior, game artist is what they call us. And I think I got the job because they liked my paintings. They thought they were digital paintings, but they weren't. So I told them that I could do it, and I actually didn't really know how to do it. But I just said I did, and it was fine. The first hairy day at work was when, I didn't actually get a chance to do any actual like digital painting for some time. And then finally, when it did come up to that moment, it took me three shots at it, and then I think I got the hang of it. It wasn't that hard once you're doing it.
Well, you already had so much experience in real life, so I guess it was transferable. If you don't mind, how, like, when you first started working for this like entry level position, what was the salary like?
Oh, it was a it was a paltry 35,000 a year.
And
Yeah.
and how long ago was this?
This was in 2010. This was in
Ah,
2010. Yeah.
my first job offer for an insurance company in Waterloo was 38,000 in 2012.
Right.
Working
Okay.
for
So I
Mercer.
guess entry level jobs are always
They always suck. I didn't end up taking that one. I got a much better offer for a company I ended up working for in Toronto. But yeah, I was just curious. Thanks for sharing. But like, I also know that you mentioned ahead of time that in our pre-chat that things were often a struggle for you. You were also working like at a bar, living in a basement. Was this during school or was this during your video game years?
it was during school, and it was a bit during the video game years because there was times where like so I left Big Blue Bubble to try out TV,
Hmm.
um, and I went to Pipeline Studios after that to work on the Adventures of Chuck and Friends, and that was and I was going to work as a technical director there. And but they kept me on doing other things. Nice people there, and that was uh, that was a bit crazy. And that didn't last. That lasted, I think, about a year and a half, and then eventually I got laid off again. And then it took a while to find another steady gig, and that came again from people that I had met at Big Blue Bubble. Um, yeah, and it's steadily, it always seems that way that the way you get more work is just from knowing people 90% of
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
That's if there's one big learning that I've had from this podcast, it's that it's if you know someone, you have work basically.
Yeah,
Um,
that's it.
so it sounds like you've been like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but laid off, I guess multiple times. Do you feel like every time it happens, do you feel kind of like worried and scared and like just try to scramble to pick yourself back up? Or do you feel like even stability in over the years of taking those different roles, even though that you know that you might reach the end of funding or something?
I mean, I think it's just a sort of reality of the type of work that it is. I've lucked out in that I haven't had to travel much out of the city. I haven't had to take a lot of work and go find a lot of work, like a lot of people have, and a lot of friends of mine have. Stability is great. Stability would be amazing, but yeah, when it does happen, something kind of clicks in where you just go into survival mode, I suppose, and you have to find a way to bring in an equivalent income to what you were doing before. um, Sometimes being unemployed is really great. If you don't have a lot, if you don't have a lot of expenses, it's just, it's summertime, you get to enjoy yourself a bit.
Yeah,
Uh,
good thing.
go,
What's the worst situation you've been in? I guess looking back over your career and schooling and everything, where it was the toughest to kind of press forward.
financially speaking, or what do you mean?
Just in general, maybe it's financial, maybe it's stress, maybe like, did you ever want to give up or like, I don't know.
No, I don't think there was ever a moment that was all that bad in that sense of like losing work, for instance. Like what it's the most it's ever been is like 2 months.
Ah,
It's really not the end of the world. Uh, but like I think the worst time ever was after I finished my book. I think that was the worst time ever. Now it was also a great time because I had met Karen around that time, and that's became my wife later on, and that was amazing. But creatively speaking, I had really sapped myself dry. Like I just fucked myself over somehow, and I didn't know what had happened. So basically, I was really extremely burnt out from doing the book because it was like such a massive amount of energy to get it done on top of working. And then, and I had basically turned every other aspect of my creative life into a commercial venture of some sort. And I think I felt like there was a good 2 or 3 years where I had nothing, almost 2 years, I think, where I had nothing to give creatively anymore. Didn't feel derivative, didn't feel like I was just sort of going through the motions. And it took a lot of soul searching to come up with what it was that I had lost. And I sort of came out of it while I was working at Time Play, because I started hiring younger artists, and I started learning a lot of new things from them. And I kind of found that what's important is a process, and learning new processes and learning new techniques. And I had kind of like just let that go, I guess. I was like, whatever, I think I've learned all I need to learn, I think. And that was a detrimental perspective for me. And now I've learned that there's a different way of, it's good to have new things. And I brought in students that I felt challenged me. And I was a little scared even of having them work for me because I thought they were so talented. And I wanted to be shook up. And it really made all the difference. Yeah.
Nice. So I guess thinking about everything you just mentioned, you're having a daughter coming up. What is like one of the life lessons you want to teach her through your whole journey of like going to OCAD and thinking you wanted to do painting to then finding video games and all this stuff?
My God, I don't know. What do I want her to know? I want her to be creative and interested in life. Sciences, I think, are very important. I like to push that with her. I don't have a good line for that. Like, I just want her to grow up happy and smart, I suppose. And if I can instill some creativeness in her life, I think that would be good too.
Well, yeah. I think that's perfect. Sorry to, I guess, swipe that in at you, but
I don't know. I hope, I don't know. There's a lot of questions there. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to keep asking more because this is an interview. So I will tell you if you're hired at the end, or whatever position I don't have to offer. So one thing we haven't chatted about is like your actual career, I guess, in video games. And for me, you kind of have a very interesting perspective in your career in video games because you've done the like video games for brands or video games as advertisements versus when people think about video games, they're thinking like EA Games, Blizzard, all that stuff. So
can you think about cool shit? They don't think about
cool shit. Well, you're still doing cool shit. So like, can you talk about? Can you kind of sum up, I guess, your view on these video games and your career in this, first of all, just so I guess people are clear?
Right. So I guess not a lot of people. I mean, okay. So what I've termed this thing that I've worked in is I call it Advergaming, and it's a type of video game that essentially exists. It doesn't need to actually make money in a lot of ways. It essentially just needs to fill a space and be noticed in that space for a period of time, because it's paid for by another company essentially just to exist as a form of advertising. And it's existed for a long time. It's existed since the Nintendo. It's existed probably before that. I just can't think of an example. Like there was a game.
There's a McDonald's Nintendo game where you had to like run around and like, I don't know, something with burgers. And then there's like this weird recycling level, if you know what I'm talking about.
Right, yeah, because they want to tell you that the brand cares about the environment, right? Like they're ridiculous games. Like there's a Noid game. Domino's Pizza had a character called the Noid. He was in Family Guy.
Oh my gosh, it was called Yo-Noid, and you had a yo-yo. It was like one of the few games I grew up on, and really, it's impossible. I finally downloaded it on like an emulator from my computer later, and like put every cheat on it just to get to the last level. Like,
is it that hard?
My brother and I would play it for hours and never get past like the circus level.
I don't remember how far I got, but I thought that game was like actually good, like actually a good game.
Yeah, the
But
music's good. I can think of it right now.
yeah, I loved it. And then there's Cool Spot, which is another example of it. And then there's Pepsi Man is another one. That was for the PS1, and that's about a giant Pepsi Man. Who did that? Angry Video Game Nerd did one on Pepsi Man.
I haven't watched that. I love his stuff. I'm gonna have to go and look that up.
Yeah, and then there's right, and then I think you could probably throw in other properties, like stuff where people basically paid for it, like something like Batman games. I think at one point you could say they could be lumped into the same thing. There's less risk in making a game that's a licensed IP than for an original IP.
Yeah.
They fall within a certain range on the financial graph. They rarely go below a certain point where you lose your shirt, and as long as you don't spend that much money on it, you'll make your profit back. But they will rarely get to a point where they go completely over the top and make a fortune, like Fortnite or Mario or any of the games that we all know about that are giant successes. But there's times where they're amazing. Like GoldenEye is an example of an amazing game. The Batman series is an amazing series, and things have changed now. But there was a period of time when property games were kind of trash. Like the first Ninja Turtles game was just terrible, just a terrible piece of crap, and nobody cared. But then eventually people started to care. But those, like, comic books lend themselves good to other media, have you heard of Marvel movies? They seem to be doing okay. So essentially, yeah. So that's kind of where I like to define the zone of what an Advergaming content essentially is. So what I've done for a long time, like the last company I worked for was called Time Play, and they now some of the listeners may not know, but if they're Canadian, they might know it. At Cineplex cinemas across Canada, before the movie starts, you play games with your phone that connect to the movie screen, and that's called Time Play. And I worked for them and was their the person that did all of their custom game content. So whenever there was a game that was paid for by an advertiser, my team put that game together. So we made games for Chevrolet cars. We made games for Winners. We made games for Goldfish Crackers. We made games for Telus. There was a lot of silly games.
Yeah, I've played probably all of them, maybe all of them. So what was your direct involvement, like you and your team? What was your specific, like 90% of your daily tasks doing?
Well, it was structured in different phases. Initially, it would be we would brainstorm ideas for the client or with the client, which would usually be an ad agency. And then we discuss different levels of involvement. They'd either have a team that would make the game, and then we would integrate all the assets. They never program the game, but they would often have their own production teams. So there would be times where my team would essentially just be there to put the graphics within the engine, make them ready, or we would do all of the work to make the game, which would be liaisoning with the client to make sure everything was working well, which is the way they liked it. Yeah. And then so essentially we were just in charge of the full process in a lot of ways.
I love that you just said liaison, because that's like such a businessy word that I don't hear anymore.
Kind of thing there. It's very businessy. Gaming is very businessy. Like, we try to make a fun thing, but essentially it didn't really matter all that much. It didn't. It just needed to get their attention for a brief period of time.
Right. So a brand pays Time Play to get screen time in front of the viewers and the audience, basically.
Not actually. That's not really how it works. Really, what the brand pays Cineplex.
Cineplex.
And then we build the content for them.
Gotcha. So
Yeah.
how, you said it's very businessy. How, I guess, often do people switch from like Advergaming to what people think regular gaming is, like Fortnite and stuff? Do people switch back and forth?
I mean, I think it's, yeah, I think it happens all the time. Like I'm being very broad with the term. Like this
Yeah.
advergaming thing that I fell into doing this, like it was the only time that it was so explicit in my career. Every other time it's been like the first time, which is we're making on the Icarly game, which is just a licensed property. But that was really, I mean, I think it almost falls within the same tier in a certain sense. But companies will make these games, right? So they can keep the
Yeah.
studio doors open and they can continue to have a good time. Sometimes they're hits, and then sometimes they're not. You know, like it sort of depends. And a lot of studios make these types of products. You know, and some studios specifically make them just so they can keep the studio going. But I think the one that I happen to be working in isn't particularly common. I don't think you see a lot. I don't know exactly where a lot of other spaces like that exist. I think maybe in agencies. I've been looking to see if these things do exist in other places. Like maybe there are other agencies that exist that just primarily only do interactive content. And you see it once in a while with like apps, and that's kind of generally where these things fall now, or app games and other stuff like that. But yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because like from a outsider's perspective, it almost seems like so many studios are creating apps and games and stuff. Like how in here in Toronto, how many studios, I guess, do you know of kind of dabble in that area?
Tons. I don't know, tons.
So does that mean that there's a lot of opportunity to work in that if you wanted to get into video games?
Oh yeah, I think so. Yeah, there is a lot of opportunities. Yeah, there's tons. You know, UX artists, UX designers tend to come from the illustration backgrounds as well. There's one of my good friends, and she's a very successful UX artist. Did animation at illustration at Sheridan, and the animation program as well. So there's yeah, there's a lot of crossover all over the place for artists and animators because everything is motion now. Everything needs to be animated. Everything it's just a mountain of work now.
So I guess what is the kind of career path that somebody could expect once they are getting in there? Like you mentioned, there's UX, you do concept art and also like art, and there's development. Like if somebody's coming out of school, for instance, where would be a good place to start?
Oh my God, I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, really, yeah. There is. I mean, I guess you just have to follow the lines of where your interests lie, and you know, if you can get your foot in the door somewhere, you can go in any number of directions. It's true. You
So
can.
maybe you start as like, I don't know, UX, and then you move up to like art director or like UX director, and then after that, like, is there like kind of a clear path? Like, I know you've worked with a team and you're kind of working with a team right now, but I don't know. I just have no idea what it's like.
Right. I mean, there's. I mean, most of the time, I imagine you would get your foot in the door. You would be some sort of designer, or you know, you could be a motion designer, or you could come in as a game artist, which is, you know, you would you would model things, and you know, game artists tend to be a kind of generalists in a lot of sense. So they would be asked to be able to model and texture and animate. Not all of them at the same level. Sometimes some artists have better abilities than others. I mean, obviously, specialists tend to be a lot better. But they can, I mean, UX is a place where UX designers can end up in a higher position than art directors. UX is a very important role these days. And UX designers have a massive influence on the world in a lot of sense. So they're very prestigious jobs and they pay very well. And then and art directors, yeah, there's, you know, art directors in the gaming industry in some senses exist more as directors, like almost like a film, I suppose. But that's not a one-to-one comparison now that I think about it. But then there's yeah. I mean, art directors, let's say in advertising industry, are like there's tons of them. Like there's like always a million art directors, you know. So it's there's different terms for all these different slight nuances in different industries that are all relatively the same word that means slightly different things.
Right.
So,
So
yeah.
what would be a good skill set to have? Like, I guess for modeling and stuff, you'd need Maya or 3D Max. For UX, you'd need some like design principles and maybe like coding, I guess, too, when it comes to like, I don't know, Python or Java or HTML or something. Like what would make a, like, who knows? I don't know.
Skill sets. Drawing is probably the most important skill set that I think exists in the world, that aside from writing, or programming. So if you can program, if you can write code, that's crazy right now. Like you can get so much work. Writing is also very great, especially now that it seems like everything is going to turn into automation. But then being able to draw, my God, is that ever useful? It's so useful. So I'd say that's the elemental skill for designers is being able to draw. You don't have to draw like Mobius to continue to work. You know, as long as you can draw pretty well, that's pretty great and can clearly show your ideas. But like skills, like if everybody uses Photoshop, I mean that's incredible. 3D modeling, I don't really care what application people use as long as they're able to be agnostic about that stuff and jump around from application to application. I think UX is one of these things now where people get really picky, right? Because it's such a hot one that people get kind of picky about which software you're doing. So sometimes, there's lots of really great software actually for that. So it's all over the place, I guess.
What is UX software? Like I don't know if I've heard of UX software before.
Oh, there's XD. That's the one I use because I'm not
X triple L
there's
sideways Z.
Yeah. What's one of them? I'm trying to remember the name of some of them. Let me look it up right now. I use XD, which isn't like the most loved one. I used it because I could figure out how to use it very fast, and it did the trick. But there's a lot of different software that people are up using that is much better. There's a lot of it. Let me look here. UX software.
Google.com.
Yeah.
Well, if you can't find them, it's totally all right.
It's all good. Anyways, yeah. What a framer? There's one. Yeah, that one's apparently hard to use, but great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Framer XD. All right, fair enough. So something else that I kind of wanted to chat about with you, because I hope and think you're willing, and it's something I haven't really touched on yet, is kind of like the salary, how to get a raise, how to value yourself as an artist, know you're not getting taken advantage of, that kind of side of things. Because being in school, we're warned a lot about like signing contracts or signing away IPs, or just like signing for the sake of like working on something exciting without thinking of the repercussions of what you're actually giving up. So can we chat about that a little bit? I don't know, like what is your experience with all of this? What is your like theory or like outlook on this, I guess, this topic?
Right. Yeah, it's kind of interesting stuff. So I think that number one, like asking for a raise, I think is really difficult. I think a lot of people struggle with it.
Oh, sure. And in any industry, people struggle for it.
Yeah,
with it and for it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's a tough question, right? Because you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want to end up in a situation where they think that you're not happy, I guess, or you're ungrateful for what you have. But I think there are strategies to make it effective, and there's lots of different ones you can play. And you can even play. You can get to the point where you almost play mind games in a certain sense that can be really beneficial for you. but it just, like, I think the most important thing 90% of the time is just leverage. Like you have to put yourself in a position where you can happily walk away if it's that important to you.
Yeah.
And it almost always works out for you to a certain degree. Like, for instance, I remember, I think the first time I asked for a raise, I just got it, like, and it wasn't really a big deal. I remember being nervous, and I talked to the creative director at the company I was at, and I was like, look, I would like to make more money and possibly get a title change. And he was like, yeah, sure. And it worked out, and everything was fine.
Wait. So I have two questions there. Number one, why did you want to make more money in a title change?
Well, does that need to even be answered? Doesn't everybody want to make more money?
Well, of course, but like, how far into the job were you? Did you feel frustrated with how much you were making? Where you reached a point where you were happy and you thought, I need to get to the next level? Like, what brought about your courage to ask for the raise in the first place?
I think I had been there for about maybe a year. I don't remember exactly, but I think I had been there for a year, and it was obvious that I was doing the work for the title. I wanted to be an art director at this point, and it was obvious that I was the one in charge of everything. So I wanted to at least have that title, and it wasn't a problem. And I had been there long enough, and I think if you're there for a year, you should probably at least try to get a raise a year.
Well, you 100% should, because just inflation goes up. So if you don't get a raise every year, you actually make less money every year by like
exactly.
I think it's like 3%. If you don't get like a 3% raise, inflation goes up by 3%. So
you have to go 3%. Okay. Yeah,
at
right.
least.
At least. So yeah, you should have inflationary increases every year, and maybe double that if you can. No, it's a good rule. I don't think it's
that's actually a thing. Like, if you look that up, like the city of Toronto actually like publishes how much cost of living went up every year, and a lot of companies will use that as, it's called an inflationary increase.
Right.
The first company I worked for did that, and that's where I learned about it. So my second question, I guess, which you kind of already answered, was if you got the raise so easily, then like, were they undervaluing the work you were doing? And do you think you would have gotten that raise if you didn't ask for it?
No, I don't think you almost ever get a raise if you don't ask for it. I mean, I think
I
there's
wish you.
yeah, I think there's moments when you might. I mean, certain companies have good structures, but sometimes good structures can be limiting as well, because there's pay bands, and they think, well, there's certain people that receive certain increases based on the position they have, and
what is it? So sorry, I don't know what a pay ban is, but like, from my experience in the business world, like most companies have a yearly review, like when the year end comes around and the profits are like figured out and the revenue and everything, and then like the shareholders are paid off, whatever, and then they figure out how much the company is going to get. Everybody in the company is going to get increase. Is that how it is in a video game studio, or like?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the companies really and how they structure themselves. Every company's different, and some companies do things differently. And yeah, yearly reviews are probably the best way to make sure that you do get an increase. But not every company. I mean, sometimes they say they do yearly reviews, but they don't really do yearly reviews. Like, a lot of companies don't. A lot of companies they're just flying by the hip, and they're just hoping everything keeps going.
So what is a pay band? Does that mean they just are like, nobody's getting ready?
Well, a band basically means there's different positions. Different positions are graded differently, and there's a top.
Gotcha.
That's all it means. So like an IT person will top out at a certain amount, and then a graphic designer might get a certain amount, but then an executive will top out, I would imagine, considerably higher. But then that's normally how I think that's how a lot of those places work. It's not 100%, but
okay. So one thing that I have noticed, and also do with myself, is it's very hard to put a dollar value on the art that I'm producing, because it comes from a very personal place. I know that. Sorry?
It's totally hard. It's very
Yeah,
difficult.
so I don't know what to price something. So like I see a lot of my friends on Instagram doing like commissions, for instance, and sometimes they'll be like full body plus color is like $25 plus like if you want a background it's $15. I don't know, something like that. To me, that seems like okay, if it takes me like 3 hours and I'm getting paid $75, like is that worth like sure it's $25 an hour, but like how do I know what my value is as an artist and my time being spent, especially working in a studio where I don't really know what everybody else is making. It's hard to
Yeah.
ask for a raise.
Yeah, and the culture is set up so people don't talk about it.
Yeah,
Um,
it's taboo.
yeah, it's very taboo, and and it would be in the benefit of everybody, I believe, if that was open, so everybody can negotiate openly. But it's uncomfortable, and pricing your own work is very, very hard. I mean, especially commercial work as well, because there's a standard there, it exists somewhere. You just don't know where to look for it. Every year though, prices are for what graphic designers and I mean broadly termed designers or animators or all of us that essentially work in the visual arts make is published, and it is relatively transparent to see how much people make.
Where
So
can I find that?
I have there's recently a survey that just came out, so I'll send that to you.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, that I was just poring over, and it's quite interesting seeing some of the statistics that exist in the world. Like illustrators apparently make the least out of every creative in the visual arts, but apparently they are the happiest. So that's good for them. Yeah, UX designers apparently get paid some of the most, but are the least happy. So yeah, take your money and shove it, huh?
Yeah, I'd be very interested to see that is. I mean, obviously it's like averages, so like I'm sure
Yeah.
there are happy UX designers and miserable illustrators, but yeah, that's super. I would love to like see that and be able to share it too. That would be great.
Yeah, it's very interesting stuff. So I will share it. Yeah, I think it's super interesting. There's a lot of methods for deciding what your work is worth. I think essentially, you know, just ask for as much as you can. I think that's essentially it. Like try not to like what is a good income? What is a good hourly wage today? Like $80 an hour is a good hourly wage today. You know, so if it takes you 3 hours to do something, ask for $240. I think that's reasonable. I don't think that's shocking. I think that's what you're worth. I think that anybody working at that will if they price that way, then all of us will make more money in the long run, and we'll all be happier, and we'll all be able to. Because what we do is very difficult. It's very hard. It's time consuming. The reason why people are asking you to do it is because they can't do it, and you wouldn't see. You wouldn't see almost anybody else in any other industry doing that to themselves. We're the only reason why we do it to ourselves is because we love doing it. I'm guessing these others hate their jobs that much that they are only willing to do it for money. They won't do it for any other reason.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I've never heard of anybody being like, you know what, I want to I want to have a very lucrative career, so I'm going to go into animation specifically. Like nobody does that. You go into like,
Yeah.
can you imagine?
Yeah.
Okay,
Crazy.
so I want to get paid $80 an hour. That sounds good. How do I find a job if, for instance, like your starting job was like $35,000? I'm assuming it's maybe a little bit more over the last like 10 years. Maybe it started out as like
I don't want to get into specifics of that stuff, but I'm doing very well now, and I'm very happy.
I don't mean like you specifically, but like say I want an entry level job. How do I price myself at $80 an hour? Like,
Oh yeah, I was thinking specifically in that instance about people like freelancers that are
okay, I see.
like that's a very specific thing. These larger businesses obviously price things in very different ways, and it's almost non-negotiable in a certain sense. They're especially when you're entering. I mean, entering a job sorry, I'm going to backtrack with that now. I feel dumb for saying it. It's also the best time when you're starting a new job to negotiate that stuff because that's where your baseline is going to be. for where you talk about next time. But if you're entering into a job and it's your first time working in the industry, you basically have to take whatever they give you.
Yeah.
Like, that's basically it. I mean, it's very hard to get your first job in the industry, I think. I think that's probably the toughest thing. Because like no one's going to trust you. You don't know anybody yet. You don't have any friends. You
don't have any friends.
You don't have any friends. You don't know if someone's gonna. If you don't know, they don't know if you're a coke addict or something. They don't know if you've got really bad issues. So they just won't give you a shot. So, and nobody gives anybody a shot.
Yeah.
So you basically just have to take whatever you can get, and that is the sad part about the first job. But your second job and your third job, you have negotiating power, and you can always just move up and basically just look at those forms that say this is what the average person makes, and go by that. And no, you shouldn't go below that. And if they're asking you to, then maybe the job isn't worth it. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's it. But yeah, I think mostly my concern always comes down to like freelancers. Freelancers are essentially younger freelancers are undercharging. I think there's a great subreddit that I look at all the time, Artists for Hire, I think it's called, or something. And I like looking at it, and the artists there are always amazing, and the stuff is always so cheap. My God, is it ever cheap? Just incredible prices, like $25 for a full illustration or something, character illustration. Like, that is wow.
Do you think that comes out of a place of I don't know if desperation is the right word, but just wanting to do work?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, 100%. You're right. And it even maybe even desperation. Like, you want to do it. You just want to do it, and you want to get the portfolio stuff out there, and you want to keep working. You don't want to do your stupid job. Working at anything. It could be a good job even. You just want to be an artist, and it's understandable. It's can be really tough. It can be very, very tough. But I think over time you'd have to really focus on that. And there's a different world. There's different worlds too, and there's different levels of clients. And most clients that you meet don't have any money, and it's just the way it is. Yeah.
Right. So the client doesn't have any money. Don't take that job.
Yeah, I know, but that is kind of how it is. Like, look at the world of graphic design, where there's a gulf of different levels, right? You look at one guy's got a client who's a mom and pop organization, and they want a logo, and then there's another guy that's working with Coca-Cola, and that guy that's working with the mom and pop, is he going to charge Coca-Cola $45 to do a logo? And what is that worth, right? What is a logo worth? What is your work worth? Now, let's assume that the guy doing the Coca-Cola stuff and the person doing the work for the mom and pop are equally as talented. Let's imagine they're both the same. They have the same quality of work, and it's totally believable. It's just that one maybe is savvier than the other and knows how to talk about it. And I think really that's where it comes down to, is just that difference. And that's where our values come, is you have to see who you're working with, and you have to see the larger picture of the company you're working for, and you have to be able to realize who they are, what they're about, and kind of what their value of their company is worth, right? Startups are kind of easy, right? Because whatever the investors have put in, that's the value of the company. And you know if your value gives a certain amount of growth that year, then you can put a percentage on that growth, and that you've brought maybe 10% growth, which is extreme, 10% growth to a company that's worth $50 million. That's an extra $5 million that was made that year. And then you can value yourself according to that, and you can say, like, well, I'm surely worth another $10,000. Based on that,
I got you $5 million, so maybe you can like flip a coin at me.
Yeah, it's all kind of like mysterious.
Yeah, that's interesting, because like it's easy to have like glowing starry eyes with like dollar signs in them when you get any client work, but being able to understand the value that you're giving that client, like the mom and pop shop versus like Coca-Cola, I think that's like the business kind of side of things, and how you can end up taking a lot of poor projects that don't pay you well, and you run yourself dry. Not to say there isn't value in doing mom and pop stuff. I'm just kind of being facetious, but yeah.
No, right. Yeah, you're right.
So, okay, so like we're talking a little bit about the startup thing, which is what I wanted to circle back into, because right now, like I'm a student at Sheridan College, which is amazing. All my classmates are like super talented. Yeah. And we all have this dream of like going through this extremely rigorous program, picking up and learning like amazing skills, and then hoping that 1% chance that we get hired after school by like a studio right away at like an entry level position. And then we can like start our career to work ourselves up to like the dream, right? Like you spend so much time building up all this trust just to get into the industry. I'm saying like the trust is like going through the Sheridan College program to get into the industry. Whereas like, what is stopping me or like another classmate or somebody who's not even in school right now from kind of doing the route that you're currently in, which is, you know, finding people that recognize you have talent and joining a startup, or joining not even a startup, just a company that wants to like pay you for your talent, I guess. Like, how do we get into that scenario that you're in right now, I guess?
So what do you?
Very convoluted way to say things. I'm saying like, how do say, for instance, how do I get into a startup right now with the work that I want to do?
Like you as like a claymation guy, you mean?
Or just any of my skills. Yeah, like a claymation guy, for instance. Like say or like let's take your role, because that's maybe a little bit easier for you to explain. Somebody who wants to do concept video game art, how do they get into a startup?
I mean, into a startup, I mean, it's a different sort of situation. Like I guess it's kind of who you know in a certain sense. Yeah. Really, it comes down to like, let's say you're a bunch of people who are in school together. Let's say there's like 3 of you or something like that. I mean, to make a video game, you're going to need a programmer. If you have a programmer, you probably don't need an artist. It's not necessary to have a successful game if you have a programmer. Programmers are the elemental figure there. And you also don't even need a money guy. You don't need somebody that knows business. I mean, it helps, but you don't need that person. In video games, all you really need is one good programmer. That's all it's ever been about, and it's all it will ever be about. Thank God. But, you know, 60% of the audience buys games that they like the look of. So, you know, that means you get to hire an artist. And an artist and a programmer together, they can have a hit game too, and they can come together. Now, a startup, of course, you know, classically speaking, they need investors to help out with that. And in that case, you know, it's good to have a money person that understands that sort of thing. You know, a friend that you trust, that comes from a background of of accounting or something like that gets all the laws and nuances associated with starting a company. And I think with those 3 people, essentially, you could have any kind of startup you want, and I think you could do quite well. So yeah, get your buddy that's in accounting, get your friend that's the artist, and the programmer, and you guys got all the makings of having a hit game.
Gotcha.
It's also an idea, I guess. Yeah.
So step 1, be a programmer.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the programming, that's the one.
How do you convince people to invest in your idea, or where do you find people to convince to invest in your idea?
Oh God, I have no idea. That's above my pay grade. That's for certain.
Well, I guess what I'm saying is, or what I'm trying to like get to is like, it's like the industry has changed so much just over the last like 5 years that like just small groups of people can do amazing things, and you don't need like a full studio and everything behind you. So
no.
Yeah, so like I really value that you and like just a handful of people are creating something that I'm sure will be smashing hit. But yeah, so I guess be a programmer or just be friends with a programmer and just create something together and then put it out there and see what happens.
Yeah, I think that's it. And yeah, you're right. The industry's changed a lot. Yeah, and the companies, the publishers and the companies have really come down to the level of the average person now, the average programmer. At first everybody was, a lot of indie games were coming out. The Steam didn't exist for a long time, and now Steam exists. But there was a lot of development teams were complaining because they would talk to Microsoft, and then Microsoft essentially would treat them like they're a giant company. And there's like, look, I'm not a giant company. I'm just a person. I'm one person. And they'd be like, well, we don't know how to talk to you. How do you communicate with a person? We can only communicate to entities and to people that represent us, represent another thing, not an actual person. Yeah. So it's changed a lot. You're right. So yeah, anybody could do it. It's probably the easiest time in history to just make a game and push it out there. It's also one of the worst times because there's a million games. So it's a push and a pull. You can make it, but will you get noticed? That's a different story because there's so much out there.
Have you figured out the secret formula to make a successful game?
No idea.
No idea.
No idea. I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. I hope I'm just gonna stick to my corner and try as hard as possible to make it great. And I'll let other people worry about that stuff. Yeah, I'm just gonna be myopic about this sort of thing because I don't really know exactly how to make a perfect game. I don't really know. It's not really my thing. I'm a graphics person. The gameplay I think is other people know games better than I do. Other people know what is fun for other people better than I do. I'm just a person that knows what the things look nice, and that's it.
Fair enough. And sorry about my extremely convoluted and confusing way to ask you that last question.
Are you embarrassed by that?
I felt the need to clarify because I started on a tangent and then realized halfway that I was going on the wrong tangent and then tried to circle whatever.
I apologize too. I think I went on a bad tangent before as well, and I apologize for that one too. I don't think it was my best work.
Apologies all around. Unfortunately, I'm not going to edit any of this out because that would take more work. Well, I think that kind of sums up everything I wanted to chat about with you. Is there anything else you wanted to share at this point?
I just want people to know that I'm working on an interesting project right now, and it's going to be pretty cool. I'm working on a remake of issue 17 of The Sandman, which is a comic book that came out by Neil Gaiman and Kelly Jones in around 1985 or 7, I can't remember. And it's an amazing issue. So I'm recreating that thing right now, and you can follow it on my blog, which is at littlejohnart.com. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Other than that, I'll let you know when the game is out and we have more things like that. And if you have any other questions at all, let's chat. I think this is fun. This is cool.
Cool. Yeah, I'll definitely look out for that. It's really cool that you're redoing Sandman. It's
fun. Actually, super fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it. And if you're listening, make sure you check out the video so you can see our glasses.
Yeah. The glasses are great. It's a real treat.
And if you're listening and you'd like to get in touch with John or follow his work, you can do so by checking out his blog, which was littlejohnanimation.com?
littlejohnart.com.
Sorry, I just wrote it down. I couldn't even read my own writing. littlejohnart.com. You can also follow him on Instagram under Fooshwa, which is FOOSHWA. And I'll include the links to both those in the description of this podcast. And that's all for now. Thank you for listening. Okay, bye.